So, 2 games into the Six Nations, and I think we're pretty close to knowing what Warren Gatland's best team is. Having said that, there is a couple of positions that are still up for grabs, I think. So in this video, I'm just going to look at them and compare the players who are in those positions. Let's get straight into it. So let's start straight away with the second rows. You've got to assume that with Dav Jenkins being the captain, that he's going to be at least one of the stars. But the other ones are up for grabs if you ask me. Adam Beard's played the first 2 games and Will Rowlands has come back after his sabbatical with his wife giving birth to their child. Now, usually I would say Will Rowlands is the nailed-on starter for me, but Beard has his merits. Though I've been quite critical of Beard quite often on this podcast, I think it's important to point out that he's obviously got some skills. He's a British Lion, and I think the line-out, particularly in defence, is where he's most useful. He's the line-out caller as well, which I don't think Dav Jenkins or Will Rowlands is in either of their clubs. I might not be a particular strength of theirs. Also, you've got to look at continuity. Beard has played pretty much every game for Wales over the last 2 years. He's seemingly a little bit of a leader in that locker room, whether that's right or wrong. But yeah, I think just dropping, it's not as simple as just dropping him for Rowlands. And particularly against Ireland, who are going to have a strong, powerful game at the line-out, maybe he's an option just for his defensiveness. But then you've got to look at Will Rowlands' strengths. Well, there's so many, to be honest. He's an absolute machine. He's really destructive with his ball carrying, his tackling is strong and explosive, and he's developed his ruck game recently over the last couple of years, which has really become destructive, and in the World Cup it was super effective and actually bailed Wales out of a couple of issues once or twice. Adding on to that, the issue Wales have had with a bit of physicality, particularly going forward, and I think Will Rowlands adds something that we've definitely been missing over the last few games. We've sort of struggled to get over the gain line at times, particularly against England, and I think this big bruising ball carrier coming in really makes a difference. So I'm a big fan of Will Rowlands. As I've said many times on this podcast before, I think he's one of our few world-class players, and to me, he comes straight in. But I guess the only other little issue you could say is Rowlands is going to go back to his club over these fallow weeks, and he's not going to have the same preparation that maybe Beard would, but still, for me, he starts and Beard goes to the bench. And actually, while we're looking at the bench, we've had quite an issue with hooker with Ryan Elias. He's taken a lot of flack recently, some unfair, but quite a lot of it fair. You have to say, with the line-out functioning so well when Elliot Dee was on, and then in the England game when Elias came on, then it started falling apart. Similar in the Scotland game when Elias was on, the line-out was a pure mess. When Dee came on, even though Scotland stopped competing a bit more, which obviously Ireland are going to do, the line-out got so much better under Dee. And I think Dee was brilliant around the park, so he starts. I don't think that's an issue. But it's on the bench now. What do we do with Elias? Do we leave him on the bench as an experienced player who can potentially come on and make an impact? But for me, he's been coming on. He came on and made a poor impact. Gatland's clearly got trust in him. He started him in the first game, so he saw him as his first choice, obviously with Dewi Lake being injured. And he trusted him in the World Cup too. But I think Elias has sort of not repaid that trust, as harsh as that may sound. For me, it's just like an issue if you're a hooker and the biggest issue of your game, which has been all his career, has been his throwing. Like, how has he not worked on that? And he's not fixed it at all. It hasn't seemingly got better at all throughout his career. And the last 2 games, you have to say, it's looking like it's getting worse. Adding on that with all the pressure that's going to come on now, I think Gatland might do, or maybe should do him a favour and take him out of the squad and bring someone else in. Now, who can come in is the question. He decided to leave more experienced players out, like the likes of maybe Bradley Roberts, who I'm a big fan of. Sam Parry potentially as well could have made the squad. But he decided to go with Evan Lloyd, and Evan Lloyd is someone who hasn't played an awful lot for Cardiff and is something akin to what he did with Archie Griffin, where he's brought him into the squad and he's wanted to have a look at him, I guess, in the squad environment. He sees some promise in him. Now, Evan Lloyd is very similar play style to Dewi Lake. He's abrasive. He's a former back rower. So there's obviously could be the worry about his darts, the same as like Dewi Lake has had in the past, although he's improved on that. But I think if Gatland was bold enough to bring him into the squad, then he's got to be bold enough to at least put him on the bench. Let's have a look at him. Like, the worst thing that's going to happen is he has a poor performance, his line out is poor, and then we're pretty much in the exact same place we are now. You could leave Elias on the bench, he could come on and he could have another poor game, and then it's just even more pressure on him. And that's not good for him, it's not good for his confidence, and it's not good for his mental health, because he's going to be coming under, and he has been coming under, a lot of criticism. So I think bring Evan Lloyd in, give him an opportunity. I understand you're throwing him into the furnace against probably the best team in the world at the moment, but I think give him an opportunity, give him a chance, and let's see what this guy's made of. You obviously see something in him because he's been brought into the squad and you wanted to have a look at him. If they're looking at him and judging that he's just not ready, then fair enough, you can stick with Elias, but I think what you've got to lose compared to what you've got to gain with bringing Evan Lloyd into the squad is a lot more. I think the upside is a lot more than the low side. So I would give that a look at. And if he's poor, or if his line-out goes to pot, or if his scrummaging is not good, then you always got the option of bringing Elias back in. But at least it just takes the heat off Elias at the moment, because he's coming under a lot of criticism and it just can't be good for the player. So I think Gatland needs to do him a favour. If he's bold enough to pick Evan Lloyd in the squad, then he should be bold enough to play him. So let's hope that happens. I'd like to know what you guys think, though. There's quite a hot debate at the moment, I think. So rounding off the forwards on the bench, there is some sort of issue at tight head. So Archie Griffin, who was on the bench for the England game, has had a bad injury and has gone back to his club, and he's probably not going to return for the rest of the Six Nations. So what happens then? Is Leon Brown going to be fit? I'm not sure. And Dylan Lewis is the other option who's been called into the team. Unless you can see that Leon Brown is 100% fit, and I'm on about 100%, I'm not talking about 90 or 95, I want him 100% fit, then for me, you might as well just put him in there, because what have you got to gain from having Dylan Lewis in there? But if there's any sort of doubt about Leon Brown's fitness, then Dylan Lewis has got to play. At least you know what you've got in him. He's not the greatest scrummager, but he's good around the pitch, he gets around. And at least you know he can just hold up his end of the bargain at scrum time and just general play. I don't want to see Leon Brown rush back because they want to have another look at him and he just picks up something else, because we just know he's so prone. This could be a moot point because he might not be fit, but if there's any doubt for me, he just doesn't play and Dylan Lewis comes in. So that was the only other thing I wanted to talk about, the forwards. Now, if we take a look at the backs, I think there's potentially 3 positions that are up for contention. One is the bench, so I'll just start with that and just get that out the way. So we're looking at scrum half on the bench. Kieran Hardy came in for Gareth Davies, who was dropped completely from the squad against England, which I thought was quite harsh from Gatland. I understand maybe he wanted to make a bit of an example of him, or maybe fire a rocket up his arse after his performance against Scotland, but I think they were executing a game plan that the coaches set out. Whether they executed it poorly or not, that is another issue. But I think bringing Kieran Hardy in, he didn't do anything in that England game. I understand the game was not in a good position for a scrum half necessarily to come on and make an impact, but he didn't do anything that I looked at and thought, yeah, okay, fair enough. I can understand why he's come into the team. I haven't seen anything from Hardy all season, and I'm quite a fan of Hardy. I don't want to be too critical of him. I think it's just a product of the Scarlets not being very good and the pack being poor there. So, but his confidence seems low. He doesn't seem like sort of to have the same zip that he's had in previous seasons. But I would bring Gareth Davies back on. He's probably our best defensive scrum half that we have at our disposal. I still obviously start Thomas Williams, but I think in a game against a side as good as Ireland, I think you want, as many good defensive players as you can possibly have. I don't see too many routes for Wales to come into this game and win, but if we're still in it with maybe 20 minutes to go, I think bringing someone of Gareth Davies' experience and just all-round ability, both in attack but particularly in defence, to help close out a game, maybe that could be a good option. And if you wanted to put a rocket up his arse, then you don't leave him out for another game. Like I said, especially when Hardy didn't do anything to set the world alight. So that would be my first move. I'd bring Gareth Davies back into the matchday squad, but start him on the bench. But keeping with the halfbacks, I want to have a little look at outside half. Now, I'm taking it for granted that Sam Costello is going to be back fit for this game. I know Ioan Lloyd come under a little bit of criticism in the England game for maybe his game management, but he's had a bit of a mulligan from most people, as he's got very, very little experience in that position. And I am part of that group. I think he got thrown in a situation where he probably wasn't expecting, and probably Wales weren't expecting, and the coaching team weren't expecting. And he had some good moments and he had some bad moments, which is what you're going to expect from a young player who's unfamiliar with that position. Now, I've heard a lot of people, the consensus seems like they want to stick with Ioan Lloyd for this game and just maybe give him a run. And at the end of the day, he's got to learn that position, and the only way to learn it is by playing in it. And I totally agree with that idea. But having said that, I'm going to maybe go against the grain slightly. And if Costello is fit, and again, it's a similar thing to the Leon Brown thing, I want him 100%. If he's not 100%, then he doesn't play. But if he is fit and he's ready to go, he plays 10 for me. You just bring him straight back in and Lloyd goes back to the bench. And it's nothing against Lloyd. It's just, I think that Costello is 100% our best option going forward over the next few years at outside half. I don't really see anyone in the regional game who's in a position to put their hand up and say, right, I think he's an option in to go forward. I think Costello is the best option. And I think you've just got to give him the opportunity. At the end of the day, he's a young player who needs to learn the position. I think he's had 8 or 9 caps. So, he's not got a massive amount of experience. And he needs the experience, and what an experience, Ireland away would be. So I think you bring him in, and he's a lot more controlling. Even though he's got an attacking presence about him, he's a lot more controlling than Ioan Lloyd is. And I think that's going to be important against Ireland, because the last thing we want to do is anything sloppy or just giving away stupid or poor decisions and poor kicks and stuff like that. So I think, although he hasn't played an awful lot of rugby, and usually I would say, let's stick with a player who has been playing, I would go with Costello. I can understand why people want Lloyd in. I think maybe the overall upside with Lloyd, attacking-wise, is better than Costello, but I think Costello is going to be the outside half for Wales going forward, so let's give him the opportunity to learn that position. He needs as much experience as possible, and get him in there. And I think if he's not ready and he fails, then I can understand if you want to give Ioan Lloyd a run out for the last 2 games. But you've got to give Costello the opportunity to make that shirt his own, because that's what we were expecting before the Six Nations. And I still think going forward over the next couple of years that he is going to be the best option at 10. I don't think Ioan Lloyd is a 10. Though there's plenty of issues at Scarlets, and he's actually been one of their bright lights, I think him maybe being at 10 is part of the reason why they've struggled as well. Like, maybe a more senior 10 would have put them in different positions, but that's a completely different subject. But yeah, I'd like to know what people think about this one, what you guys think in the comments, because I think this could be a little bit controversial, but that's what I think. Stick with Costello and put Lloyd on the bench, and then he can be an impact off the bench. And rounding off this video, I'm going to look at Josh Adams and Mason Grady and what's going to happen there. I'm not too sure, to be honest. I know this is probably the one I was most sort of on the fence. I sort of sway between both sometimes. Sometimes I think Grady's the better option. Sometimes I think Adams. I've always been a massive fan of Adams, and just seeing him play the way he is at the moment is just not the player that we know and we have absolutely loved. And it's not the British Lion that we've seen make big performances for Wales in the past. Having said that, other than probably that high ball that he dropped against England, he hasn't made a mistake in defence. He's actually been his normal good self in defence. I think he helps George North be a better defender with his experience, and I think he just knows how to marshal defences and stuff like that. But his fitness has been what the issue has been for me. He's barely played this season, and then when he has played, he hasn't been at his best, and I think his confidence has clearly suffered from that. Then you look at the other option, and it's Mason Grady, and he's been absolutely, you got to say, fantastic for Cardiff this season on the wing, particularly in attack. Where the issue for me comes with Grady is the defence, but mainly mistakes. I'm not saying he's a bad defender in the way that he can't tackle, but he just doesn't read the game as good as naturally a player like Adams, who's had way more caps and way more experience. And Grady obviously has played a lot on the centre as well, so he's sort of learning two positions at the same time by playing centre and wing. But is the potential upside a lot more than having Adams on the bench, just doing on the pitch, doing a solid job, to having maybe Grady making a moment of magic, which we've seen at Cardiff this season? We've seen moments where he's just done something because he's a freak athlete and he's got that little bit of X factor. We've seen him create stuff out of absolutely nothing. And with opportunities being few and far between in this game, no doubt, then a player who can create something from nothing could be potentially a good option. Now, obviously going back, this is where I swing back and forth. Then you see the mistakes. I mean, against England, he had that yellow card. Now, you could say that was maybe his positioning. He was quite narrow for, I think he was defending on the wing, and he'd come sort of in quite narrow. Maybe a different, more experienced player would have stayed out and maybe marshalled things a bit better. It was a bit of a catch-22 because he had to make a decision either way, and maybe he was just a bit unlucky that he did knock it on. But yeah, that's where I'm on the fence, and I literally can't decide now, to be honest. I would like to know what you guys think. Maybe I would, do you know what, I would think I would just go with Grady. It's another one of those things, if you've got him in the squad and you're going to be bold enough to pick him, then let's give him an opportunity. We know what we've got in Adams. We know that Adams is struggling a little bit at the moment. Gatland's literally name-checked him with issues in that Scotland game. So I think maybe give Grady an opportunity. At the end of the day, he is going to be a player for Wales going forward, whether it's on the wing or centre. He is going to be part of that squad. Although his impact off the bench can be very important, maybe just give him an opportunity. And we're in a rebuilding phase, and I understand you do need these senior players. And like I said, I wanted to stick with Adams for the England game after he was poor against Scotland. But I think now we're not going to do anything in this tournament. We're probably not going to win against Ireland. Like, the odds are, the odds are stacked against us. Maybe give just Grady an opportunity, and let's just let him make the mistakes on the pitch, like people are saying they want to see Johan Lloyd do. Let him make the mistakes and learn at the highest level. I just think that could be potentially the better option, rather than just going safe and solid with Adams. As much as I love Adams, he's just not what he once was. Whether he can get back to that player, I don't know. Is Father Time just catching up with him? But we know we've got a special product in Mason Grady, and his biggest thing is he needs to just learn the game, and like we said, the only way you're going to learn it is by doing it. So that's my thoughts. I'd like to know what you think. Subscribe, comment. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.